Welcome to the Voices of the Internet of Things. This is Chuck Martin, and we're broadcasting live from the Arm Tech Conference in San Jose. With me today is Mike Muller, Chief Technology Officer and co-founder of Arm, and I'm so happy you're here to join me here. Welcome, Mike.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So you've been at Arm since the beginning, and this is way back when.
From before the beginning.
What were you thinking?
Well, you have to take it back to started work on the first Arm technology in a project started 1983, and we had first silicon 85, and then we were spun out as a separate company in 1990, which I guess is the official beginning of Arm the company rather than Arm the technology.
So what was your idea at the very beginning?
We were doing home computers based on 6502. And we were looking at 16 32-bit replacements for more performance, and everything was just too complex and too expensive. So in those early days, we used to do everything in software. There was very little hardware support. You can do UARTs in software almost. And then the newer generation chips all needed DMA engines and complexity, and we built a few prototype systems using all the available chips at the time, and then the CEO of the day had been on a kind of study tour around America and came back and said, there's this thing called RISC, why don't we build our own chipset? And it was, okay, how hard can it be? And so the idea was to build, it was actually in those days, it was a 4-chip solution to build a complete personal computer with the idea of low cost. And one of the driving things was packaging costs. And so the system architecture, the predominant question was how many pins can we afford on the chips? And the CPU was the only thing that was deemed important enough to get 84 pins, and the rest had to fit in 68. So it was all about software systems and keeping down cost.
So did you ever think it would become this big?
Clearly not. I mean, people rewrite history, but I've got a copy of the original sort of strength, weakness, opportunities and threats SWOT analysis that we did about 2 months after we'd been founded. And it doesn't actually say mobile phones anywhere there. It has personal digital assistants, so the idea of handheld
PDA.
PDAs were there, but not mobile phones. That's what came with the design win in Nokia a few years later.
So as CTO, did you basically have to simply follow the market? Or did you end up having to lead the market?
Well, in those days, I started as a system architect. I did the MMU system architecture definition and designed the first I/O controller chip. But when we started Arm, the CEO kind of went, we've got 2 ways to go. We can either spend a load of money and bring in people from the outside who understand the commercials, or we can take a chance with you lot. And a few of us transitioned. And those early days, I went from being architect to running marketing. So actually, I ran marketing for the first few years in Arm. Okay, it was more product marketing than real outbound marketing, but we all did a little bit of everything.
So how did your job evolve over the years?
Well, I guess over the years I've run marketing. I've actually run marketing twice. Did business development, and then as we got bigger, ended up back as CTO, worrying about kind of how you marry together where the technology is and where the money is. And I've always been interested as much in the money as I have been in the technology.
So what do you like? Is it the technology or is it the marketing?
Well, at the heart of it all, I'm still a slightly autistic engineer, so I like solving problems. But the problems I like tend to be, how do you make money out of this technology, or where's the money going to be, and what technologies are you going to need to be able to access that revenue?
So what are the big surprises along the way for you?
I mean, the biggest surprise, our success. I mean, we were spun out of Acorn, our original company, as it was sort of going out of business during the whole consolidation that was happening in the PC marketplace, and Arm seemed like a least bad outcome at those days. Would I ever have said we'll be where we are today? No. I mean, our CEO kind of went, we're gonna sell millions, we're gonna become the global standard, and it was kind of yeah, yeah, maybe. So I think that's the biggest surprise.
And what about the SoftBank merger?
I mean, that's been fun. I mean, the great thing about ARM is every 2 or 3 years the world looks completely different. While in some senses, for me, it's been this slow, steady, incremental change. You look back and you see there are times when things really did change. And I think the SoftBank acquisition has allowed us to go back and relook at. I mean, we've always been in the business of long time to money. You know, people talk about how fast the design cycles are in consumer electronics, but when you look at the underlying technology developments, it's 2, 3, 5 years from really starting a new architecture design to there being any serious revenue from it. So we've always handled long time to money, but that's always been overlaid on the close the quarter, close the quarter, close the quarter, show us the revenue. With SoftBank, we've had the opportunity to look more at what's our investment profile for the next 3 years to generate the most return in the 5+ time frame, and not have to explain necessarily to the city, the stock market, how quickly that money is going to come. So we were growing an IoT business with what was called the IoT business unit, turned into ISG with the Pelion platform we have today. But we were funding that in kind of an incremental way off the revenues, whereas now we can say, well, there are some big acquisitions we need to make, that we need to do, but the money flows in 3 to 5 years' time. So SoftBank's allowed us that freedom to make those investments in a much deeper way than we would have done if we'd been publicly traded.
Can you talk a bit about the basic consumer behavior, acceptance, and absorption of technology today? The speed of technology that's being developed today seems to be a lot faster than in previous years. Can the market absorb it that as quickly as you can develop it?
I don't know. I mean, I sometimes find myself thinking about, is the world actually moving any faster? I mean, I look back and gone, okay, a big chunk of my life has been the coming of mobile. And there's only for me really been like kind of 2 phases in that. There was mobile, you could make a phone call anytime, anywhere. And mobile, you could do anything on your phone anytime, anywhere. But that's like 20 years with those 2 things in it. Now, yes, my phone today does a lot more than it did last year, did more than it did the year before, but it kind of blurs together into doing, once you've gone from dumb phone to smartphone. I don't think the technology in the last 5 years has radically meant people are doing things completely differently. So I think the technology absorption is really quite incremental, and it's only when you look back that you go, from a society point of view, you would get funny looks if you walked down the street talking into your phone, to it being completely normal. I mean, but it's taken years for that transition to happen. It's not as though that is something that happens on a weekly, daily basis. So I think it's much more incremental than people say. Yeah,
in the early PC days, I used to, when I was talking with Bill Gates, I'd say, things are going so fast. He'd say, no, they're not. Is that kind of how it is today?
Yeah, I mean, I think, in a more and more connected society, in a more and more global environment, decisions get taken faster. You have to react quickly to stay ahead, but you have to act faster and faster to stay on the leading edge of that wave as it breaks. But it's still kind of rolling in. It feels at about the same speed.
Does it feel like that when you're in crisis mode, though?
Well, in any business, a crisis I don't think is the quite word, but when you're doing it day in, day out.
Crunch mode.
But it becomes normal. That's for me, again, the thing that's made ARM really fun is we're always in that mode, and it's always happening right now. And so there isn't it used to be so calm and easy, and now it's really fast. It's always felt like that. The early days, no revenue, no money, no wages to be paid, got to close a deal, right, was just as urgent and pressing as it is today.
Right. So yesterday there was discussion about basically ARM not doing things because someone says do this. It's really ARM leading. Where's that push-pull in the market these days, just in general?
Well, we've always been focused on customers and partners, and for me it's always been a question of listening to what their problems are rather than necessarily listening to what they say you want to do. Because you tend to be engaged on a project, and a project tends to be delivery today and the next 12 months, and that's really what's really important right now. But what you have to listen to is the conversations that tell you what is that they're going to be really interested and exercised about in 2 to 3 years' time. Because from a technology and engineering perspective, you've got to be that 2 to 3 years ahead to be there. So a lot of the conversations are about today, but what you really have to listen to is what does that mean about tomorrow.
So do you have to quietly be patient where someone's saying, we really want to do this, and you know what's coming? And they're saying, I want to do this, and you know it's the wrong thing?
Well, I mean, the funny thing is that there's different timelines. I mean, in some ways, the hardware timeline moves the slowest of all, and you can kind of predict quite well what's the hardware roadmap looking into the future, because those things are actually playing out over several years. What's much harder to judge is what's the app that's going to be running on that? What is the final customer product excitement pull, which comes from the software that gets deployed on it? And that happens on a completely different timeline.
Can you talk about the fifth wave? Since a lot of our listeners don't know what that means.
Fifth wave, as in IoT,
yes,
and the Internet of Things. Well, I guess as you look around, we're used to appliances getting smarter and smarter, and we're entering the wave where everything has some computational in it and some comms that goes with it, light switches, thermostats, the environment around you, fridges, toasters. Some of them you might go, well, does it really add any value? Do I want an internet-enabled toaster? But as you see more and more devices having that connectivity, you get scale effects where it's possible to actually run systems, whether it be the efficiency of your home, the efficiency of your office, or in industrial of your actually manufacturing plant, when you actually bring all of these devices together and make them connected. And that's the next wave we've had as we get into every appliance that's around you actually becomes connected.
Obviously, IoT is a very, very, very big thing. Normal people have no idea what that means. Where does that get connected?
I think it's just through the products and services they want to buy. I mean, it's a bit like the early days of mobile, where the mobile service was being sold on 2G, 3G, 4G, and on some level, who cares what the underlying technology is that make your mobile phone? The answer was, we've moved from GPRS and Edge and vaguely getting to the point where actually it just worked because the bandwidth was there, and now you're into the subtleties of, well, do you want it a bit faster? But there was that transition from mobile internet not really working to, of course it works, I'm just a little bit impatient. And I think with IoT, a lot's talked about IoT today, and for me, it's a bit like the early days. If you work hard, if you have the right website, you can make it work. But we need to get to a point where things are interconnected and the apps you have make all of those things work, and you don't really realize it's happening. That's when I think IoT starts to take off, when it's just an expectation that as you add more and more intelligent components into the environment around you, you get more and more value out of it.
For the bigger things like connected cars, for example, autonomous vehicles, what will earn the consumer's trust that stuff works? I mean, consumers, they'll go to a meeting, they'll see the PowerPoint doesn't work, and then we're telling them that, but an automatic car will work. Where is the confidence going to come from?
I think for most people that will come through experience, experiencing the devices. Those who've got kind of advanced driving features and are used to using them and slowly becoming reliant on them.
So it's the boiling frogs.
Yes. I don't think it's suddenly that this report will announce that connected cars are now safe, tick. It's been done. It's not the external evidence. I think it'll be a personal experience, either you or your family or your friends or your colleagues, that it becomes accepted that it just works.
So are you tracking when that's going to happen in terms of more autonomous vehicles?
We do an awful lot in monitoring markets, but we much more invest in what we know are the long-term trends. Is that going to pick up and generate more design wins and more royalties in 5 years' time or 7 years' time? We build models of it, but the world always plays out completely different from us. And I guess one of the fun things about ARM is we get to play in lots of different markets. And
some in every market?
I'd say, yeah, okay, let's say in all the markets. And some of them are going to develop quicker than expected and others are going to be slower. And we're not betting on just one market. And therefore, I don't think we're that obsessed on, well, when will this one actually take off? Obviously, there are people within the organization focused on that, and that's what they want to do. But when you sum across it, some of them will take 5 years longer than expected, and some of them will just take off so much quicker.
So as the CTO, you must have leaders of these different groups, and they must all be excited about their group, I'm guessing. And you're the person who has to step back and say, I know you're all excited, but this one, it's not going to be so soon.
Yeah, but I mean, on one level, you need to keep everyone excited about what they're doing all along, and that the trick, I guess, is balancing the investment portfolio and quite how much can you put into all of them, and probably you equally disappoint everyone that they could all have 4 times as much resource working on it.
Right. Well, where do you see the smart home going?
I mean, I think smart homes are kind of here. They're kind of painful. I've got a bunch of smart tech, and I oscillate between quite liking, wires and switches because I know they work, and then having other parts of my home that have a lot of technology in it. I think for me, machine learning is going to actually be necessary to make it work. I'm talking on Thursday about some of the challenges I have on trying to make my home safe from a kind of security perspective, and it's just too hard. And one of the solutions there, I think, will be machine learning, because you assemble all of these random components and you don't quite know how they all interact and talk to each other. And doing the classic corporate sysadmin role is just too time consuming. And so you need to be able to throw them together and go, just organize yourself, guys.
So can the world in IoT be secure ever?
I mean, nothing is ever completely secure, whether it be a bank or an IoT device. It's a question of keeping the threshold high and keeping that vibrant, because the world moves around you, and therefore you need to be able to react and change to that. And that's one of the, I think, fundamental things in IoT is that we need to actually resolve issues around device management. It's not a question of just deploying a device. Here is my device, it is secure, and I put it into the field, because the threats change and you need to be able to go back and refresh those devices and keep the security constantly changing. To make IoT systems really secure, they need to be dynamic and constantly adapting to the environment that's around them.
So you're obviously very global. What are you seeing in terms of the world that's different, and what are you seeing that's pretty much the same?
I think the challenges are predominantly the same wherever you go. I think I've seen in IoT motivations change. Is this is it driven by government? Is it driven by environmental issues? Is it driven by efficiency issues? So you often see the same things happening, but in one region it's because individual companies are trying to save money and therefore reducing the cost of managing your smart building and keeping your heating or cooling bills low is driven by sort of a personal financial driver. And exactly the same technology is driven in another region where there is a government mandate to reduce CO2 emissions, and then that drives the same technology to be adopted, but from a completely different commercial perspective, which can change which players in the whole chain actually are taking the lead, who pulls it through, is it a bottom-up designing happening or is it a top-down? So a lot of the dynamics of the market are very different. The underlying technologies are all the same.
So it sounds like these days, and I don't want to minimize it, but the technology is kind of the easy part.
Technology is always the easy bit. It's, you know, I run a small research group, and you know, they'll tell you, I always tell them, you know, it's either about the money or it's about the people. They're the difficult issues. The technology, yeah, that's what they get paid to do, but hey.
Okay, so lastly, going forward, especially in IoT, what excites you in the future?
I think it's the bringing together of this whole number of new devices, whether it's you know, really low cost plastic transistors printed on thin films that you can wrap around a glass bottle, through to complicated, really expensive systems deployed in a truck, and the smart homes, how the changes that are happening in the hardware meet the software that can actually be deployed on the device and all the cloud services that join it together. And for the first time, it really is system deployment at a scale. It's not about individual items. It really is about deploying global systems.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you all for listening to the Voices of the Internet of Things.